Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm very excited about this guest. I've got Thad Dupper here. Thad has a very unique journey. I'm excited to dive into it today. He's got over 35 years of experience in the tech sector. He ran the NASDAQ listed public company Evolving Systems, overseeing the delivery of innovation within the telecom sector across the world. He is the founder and CEO of Dupper Analytics, created to help small businesses gain the technological advantages that large businesses have enjoyed, to provide it at a cost that is a fraction of other cloud solutions. He has experience navigating the waters of venture capital, sits on several renowned boards, and is a successfully published book writer. Thad, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Brandon. Nice to see you again.
For the audience members that don't know you, why don't you give us like a brief background? What's your story?
Sure. So I'm New York City born and raised. And when I was at college, it was just at the beginning of technology, computer science.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated at a point in time that was fortuitous because anybody with that major could get hired.
Mm-hmm.
I started my career with a company called Amdahl Corporation, and I was on the technical side. This was a competitor to IBM, and we sold mainframes. And I spent the first 5, 6 years of my career on IBM operating systems. So I'm pretty steeped with the technology background, and I found that was a very good foundation. I then went to a startup by the name of Teradata for 12 years. I was part of the early management team there, and we were the pioneers in big data, data warehousing. And we took that company from under 1 million to over 250 million. And then we were acquired in 1993 by AT&T and NCR at the same time. And being on the East Coast, that's where AT&T was headquartered in New Jersey. And that gave me an entree into a lot of the AT&T executives. And I spent a lot of my career with a technology focus in and around the telecom industry, communications industry. Fast forward, I was given an opportunity to come out to Colorado for a company called Evolving Systems. And the claim to fame of Evol was we would activate mobile devices. Mm-hmm. And our customers, as you mentioned in the intro, were international. And it was a great deal of travel. And then you also learn currency hedges. And we had employees in India, in the UK, and in the United States with branch offices around the world. And we had a follow the sun organization. So that really exposed me to a lot of international business, and being a public company, all the Sarbanes-Oxley requirements for posting your 10K and your 10Q every quarter, having audited financials, having public shareholders, mm-hmm. and having a public float in the company. Fast forward now, you mentioned Dupper Analytics. What's unique about Dupper Analytics is we build cloud-based solutions for small businesses here in Colorado. But what's unique, and I'd say innovative, our team, other than myself, is made up of talented high school and college students. So we give students an opportunity to learn, and we mentor them in the early phase of the technology industry. Our customers get cloud-based solutions at a fraction of the cost of what you pay for, a Salesforce, Asana, a Sugar, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've got something that few people have, which is the background experience running a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. I mean, I've seen the pictures of you when y'all kind of like went live on there, and Evolving Systems is like on, I don't know if it was Wall Street or whatever. It was like the big screen. I thought that was super cool. I think everybody's got this curiosity in them. Like, what does it take to get to that point? Right? How do I go and become this person and acquire the skill set to run a publicly traded company? I mean, what would you tell somebody like that? Like, what did the journey look like to get to that position?
Well, the short answer is hard work and also luck. That's the short answer. what I do think was critical in my career journey was when I transitioned from being on the technical side of the house, operating systems, databases, development, and I moved over to sales. And I remember when I made that move, our vice president said, it's very important you're successful in this next assignment. And I know what he meant in hindsight. You get a P&L, you get a quota, you start managing, revenue, much more customer interaction. And the other thing about sales, which I don't think it's very hard to get to the C-suite if you don't have revenue and sales responsibility at some point in your career. And it can be individual quota, it can be a region, it can be nationwide, it can be global. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I found challenging about sales is on the technical side, you have all the, everything's under your control. The developers work for you. And whether it takes a day, a month, or a year to solve the problem or to develop the product, eventually it'll get done. And you have control over those assets. When you're in sales, you're selling to a customer you don't have control over. You don't have control over their budget. You don't have control over their day timer, their calendar. And that to me represented a challenge. And I was intrigued by that because there was a dimension that I wasn't able to control. So then I had to earn it. Mm-hmm. And I think once you've had a P&L responsibility, it broadens you and it prepares you for general management. Mm-hmm. So that was a critical step. After running sales organizations, then I did go into general management. General management defined as having development. Again, my background is technology, product development, marketing, HR, finance, professional services, and sales. Mm-hmm. But the step and the transition from a technical job to a sales job was a key increment for me. And then going from sales into general management broadened my experience base.
Mm-hmm. I can tell because like my dad, he's the technical side of the sales team for he's worked for IBM for about 15 years. He's worked for multiple companies, and there's the sales guys, right? Usually very extroverted, usually very outgoing, right? There's a very value added based sales process to what they do. And then they got like the tech guys there who are like responsible for answering all like the tech questions. So it's very rare that you get this blended approach. Usually one is not successful in both categories. But it sounds like you were able to learn that, which is what gave you the skill set and the well-roundedness to get, I guess, boosted into this general manager position that then gave you exposure to multiple other departments.
Well, you're right about that. And a couple comments. You know, we used to say the difference between an introvert and an extrovert developer is the extrovert developer looks at your shoes. The introvert just looks down at his shoes, right? So what you need somebody who's got a technical base who can communicate and talk. And I remember in my career, I was teaching classes in Manhattan. And every couple of weeks, I would teach a class to customers on operating systems, very technical, IBM control blocks, virtual storage, dynamic address translation. But these were to our customers. And one of our sales VPs happened to be walking by, and he just stopped at the doorway, and he leaned against the doorway for a couple of minutes and listened to me while I was teaching the class. A couple of weeks later, I got a call from the sales department saying they'd like to meet with me. And what you put your hand on, what you put your thumb on right there is true. The ability for a technical person to communicate, to connect to a customer. And then I think, as we all know, the most important skill for sales is the ability to listen and hear what a customer's need is. And when you have those skills, and you don't start off being great, I wasn't God's gift to sales when I transitioned, but over time, wins and losses. The other thing I always say when I'm interviewing people, I always ask them I ask them about their successes. And then after we get to know each other and we have a little bit of a chemistry, I say, tell me about one of your failures, one of your disappointments. And, they'll say, oh, there was a sales I lost, or a product we introduced that failed to reach its revenue goals, a partnership that didn't achieve its goals.
Mm-hmm.
And then I always ask, what did you learn from it? That's the most important question in the interview. Because if the candidate responds and says, well, I made a mistake, and I thought, the VP of development had the budget, but actually I made a mistake. It was with the CFO. Or, when we laid out our plan with this partnership, we were too aggressive, and we didn't bring in and, train the salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'll have a candidate who said, well, the customer lied to me. Or, our partner didn't deliver.
Mm-hmm.
So you will have failures. You will have disappointments in your career. And I always say, it's okay to make a mistake. Don't make too many of them, but it's okay to make a mistake. But what's not okay is not to learn from it. And when I'm interviewing people and they have had a disappointment or a failure, I always want to hear what it is they learned from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's somebody who can grow and learn from the past mistakes. We all make them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was key. Yeah.
Yeah. I love asking the question, tell me about a failure. Whose fault was it? And the guys that pinpoint, and start pointing the finger and blaming other people, wasn't my fault, this and that, versus the guys that look for a way to own the problem. I mean, those are the kind of guys that I want. Extreme ownership, own the problem. Even if it was somebody else's fault, how could you have done something to prevent that going forward if it were to happen again?
Those are your best people. You learn more from your failures than you learn from your successes.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like this was a really big step in learning how to learn and manage P&L, which is running sales teams. What would you say were some of those biggest, if somebody were flipping it on you and interviewing you for the general manager position and saw that you had this experience running sales teams, and they asked you that exact question, hey, what did you learn from this? What were your biggest takeaways? What would you tell them?
Well, you have to listen to your customers. You also have to translate what the customer is really saying.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what they want or what they say is not exactly what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've had customers say, we want a product that does X, Y, and Z. Then we go back into the development team. And as we start absorbing and analyzing what X, Y, Z features are, we actually come back with something different because we think we know what they wanted. They just didn't articulate it that well. Mm-hmm. Remember, the customer is not in product development. They can give you a good idea. And I've had some of my best ideas from customer meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be able to take what they're saying and then morph it into what the product can really do. There are times when you have to also say no to a customer. A customer may want to pull your product or service in a direction that suits their needs, but it doesn't suit your company strategy. It takes a senior executive to be able to say no. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I will say, you mentioned, running a public company. Public company quarter comes around every 13 weeks. 13 weeks isn't a long time. So every 13 weeks, you're posting your results, revenue, expenses, and profit, earnings per share, EBITDA, to your investors every 13 weeks. That's a very fast treadmill. Sometimes the pressure of reporting every 13 weeks can force you into short-sighted management decisions. Now, when you're running a private company, you usually don't have those issues. You can have a demanding investor in a private company, as you know, but public company, 13 weeks, that comes around very fast.
So it sounds like you kind of built out some well-rounded skills managing the tech side, learned the sales side. That gave you the opportunity to then get a general manager position where you're now exposed to multiple different departments there, and that led to you getting this opportunity to run this publicly traded company. I mean, is that right so far? Because I'm curious how
Oh,
that
it's right.
opportunity presented itself.
No, well, it presented itself as you do a good job at VP of sales, then you do a good job as EVP of sales and services,
Okay.
and then the board says we want to transition to make you president, and then 3 months later CEO. Now, what I haven't mentioned, which is critical, and it doesn't matter if it's private or public, you've got to know your way around a balance sheet and a P&L. You've got to know your numbers. I was in a CEO peer group, and I was surprised how some of these other leaders did not know their numbers. And that's one of the things I can compliment you on, Brandon. You know your numbers, you're on top of your game. I mean, you know what's happening in your business. But you should know revenue bookings were important to us, which is we get an order. That order eventually turns into revenue. My expenses, and then for us, EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization,
Mhm.
was very key. And then the other thing, and for the smaller business owners out there, is statement of cash flows and cash. So, yes, you need to understand and lay out the strategy for the business, where you're going to take the product, the service. You need to stay close to customers. But when you've got a general management job and a C-level job, uh, you've got to know your financial statements.
They're like your dials. I would compare your
Absolutely.
financials to flying an airplane. Pilot can't fly that airplane without seeing the pressures and the height and the direction and the radar. Like he can't. I don't care how good of a pilot you are, especially at night. And if you don't have all those dialed in, I mean, it's a disaster. I can tell you that would be the number one thing that I regret and wish I had done. If I had to pick one thing when I started my business was get my finances right, because I'll tell you, after the first year, when I had to start and do my taxes, and I had to go sort through all the pictures of all the receipts from these deals that I had in my iPhone album. Oh my God, that was such a painful event. I'm kid you not, I jump started my business on credit cards, and I had, for all of you small business owners listening out there and you're using credit cards to start your business, for the love of God, please get your finances together, because I had to go through 11 different credit card statements and flow through 12 months to find each expense that I had. It took me 7 weeks, spending at least 1 or 2 hours a day. It was an absolute nightmare. So I'd say that is a huge part about being able to run a business successfully. Now, with your publicly traded company, Evolving Systems, y'all had like a whole finance department, doing that. So it was managed, it was good. What did the onboarding process look like once you were promoted to CEO? Because no one's born being a CEO, right? Right. No one's got those skills. I mean, it's got to be a lot to take in and get
Well,
up to speed very quickly, especially when you have quarterly reporting to investors and your stock price is going to dictate what that is. And I imagine you're pretty heavily compensated based on a stock price when you're promoted in that position.
you
Is that
should
is
be.
that
I mean, your compensation plan should be tied to the performance of the common stock. And almost every public company's, there's a compensation committee on the board
mhm,
that creates the CEO's compensation plan. It should be tied so that you do well when your shareholders do well.
mhm.
Also, your other stakeholders, your employees and your customers. But getting back to your question, first of all, you're just not dropped into the CEO job. Usually, there's a transition plan. You've had other general management jobs before you became CEO. Nobody goes from, you know, not running a P&L into running a public company P&L. So when we were at Teradata, we were taken over by AT&T and NCR, and NCR in particular, the one compliment I can give them is that they were very good on KPIs and operational metrics, almost to the point of pain. But the byproduct, the upside of that experience was you learned about gross margins. You learned about operating income. You knew where they were on the P&L, and you knew what line items affected gross margins and op income. So, as I went through my career, I became more and more comfortable with financial statements and the levers that would affect the performance of the business.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and the other thing that's very important is, we would go on road shows and meet with New York investors, Boston, San Francisco. And these people in big funds are investing big dollars. And they want the CEO to come in and to know the numbers, not to have to look down, not to have to think about it, look up. You just know it by rote. And they can tell. And when they get that confidence level, then they're going to invest their clients' money in your business. And they'll keep it invested in the business as long as you keep showing, recurring progress. Not every quarter has to be great, by the way. Things happen in business, things happen in life. You can have a bad quarter. But again, it's how you respond to adversity. Just like when you had a failure or you lost a sale, what did you learn from it? You can have a bad quarter. That's always how I always say, a guy says, oh, he's a great CEO. And you go like, yeah, he's never had a down quarter or a bad year. Anybody can be a good guy when the numbers are great. Your test of leadership is how you lead the team in a tough quarter, in a tough year. We just came out of the pandemic. A lot of people's numbers were down. Now, that was kind of a get out of jail free card for a lot of people, but the measure of somebody's integrity and leadership skills is how they deal with adversity, not when everything's going great.
What were some of those adjustments that you made when things shifted from going great to not going so well? What does that look like?
First, we cut staff, we cut expense. And that can sound harsh, right? Mm-hmm. It's like being a surgeon. We have to go in and we have to do surgery fast. So I've talked to a lot of early stage companies, a lot of entrepreneurs, companies I've invested in. And if I could share one tip that I've seen people make a mistake in, is they're too slow to cut in the face of a downturn. Mm-hmm. And that may sound pretty harsh, but it's advice that comes from many years of experience, that it's better to cut sooner and deeper and faster than it is to hope for the next quarter to turn around. Because, cash to a business, especially a small business, is like air to a diver. And, it's better to cut sooner rather than later. That's a tough message, but I found in my career that's usually been when I've been most successful, is when I've taken action sooner. Could be hiring a whole new team, or it could be downsizing because of a challenge.
So let's talk about the cutting, because I'm curious if there's anything else, any other tools that you pulled out to do this. But is it in regards to cutting? So earlier this year, you had, Facebook or Meta, Google, a bunch of tech companies laid off like 240,000 people, and they took a lot of flack from it because they're like, dude, you didn't need to do that. Everyone was like anticipating this depression, this economic downturn that's supposed to happen, the most anticipated economic downturn ever. And they caught a lot of flack for it. And it sounds like that's the strategy that you're saying that, you kind of employed. How do you know when it's time to do that, right? Are you looking at key performance indicators, or are you looking at where the economy's headed to try to get ahead of it before the bleeding starts? I mean, at what point do you say it's time to start cutting?
Well, in our business, technology, software, I had leading indicators and I had trailing indicators. My leading indicators were bookings and backlog. Now, I could get an order from T-Mobile Germany or AT&T. Let's say that order was for $6 million.
Mm-hmm.
We don't deliver that $6 million in 30 days. That $6 million may be a project that takes 2 years. So we would track our orders. Once we took an order, it would go into backlog, and then we would work the project. It would turn into revenue and eventually cash. So when my orders and my backlog were growing, I knew my subsequent quarters in revenue and profit would be good. So I would always tell our investors for involving systems, our leading indicators are bookings and backlog growth. Our trailing indicators are revenue and profit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true for Apple. It's true for Oracle. So I had leading indicators, and my advice to the business owners out there is, what are your leading indicators? And if those leading indicators start to dip, now, don't get me wrong, if you have a bad week, if you have a bad month, that doesn't mean run around, let's fire everybody. But let's understand, and that also comes back to analyzing the sales funnel. And remember, we have different phases, right? We have suspects, prospects, qualifying deals, and closing deals. And, we have to look at the topography of the funnel. We have, when you're running a large sales team, different salespeople will have different styles. Some people, you can believe when they say the deal's coming in on February 5th, it comes in on February 5th. There are other guys who say the deal's closing in February. You have to say what year, right? But you should have leading indicators and dials in your business. And if those dials, those leading indicators start to show weakness, analyze it. And the other thing I'd say is, Brandon, Meta and Microsoft and CRM, Salesforce, they may have caught flack on CNBC for cuts. But I'll tell you where they didn't get any flack: in the boardroom and with their investors, because their stock's all up. And I'll tell you, there wasn't a high-tech CEO who didn't go into their boardroom in past February through June of this year, where the board didn't say, when are we cutting? Because it just became de rigueur, the style for tech companies to cut in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And, usually you can always cut 3 to 5%. There are always some low performers. It's not easy, but, you're getting paid these dollars, and you're being charged with this responsibility to make the difficult decisions, right? The easy ones don't come to you, right? They get taken care of down the org chart.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say identify what are the leading indicators, the knobs and dials in your business, because that's going to give you the heads up. Things are good, things are slowing.
So tool number one was cutting staff, reducing overhead. And the metric that you would use to do that were leading indicators, which led to your lagging indicators like revenue. So you use your leading indicators to say, hey, look, our bookings are down, our number of book calls are down. That's going to, in the future that you're not going to have as much money coming in. And that's when you see that leading indicator go down, that's your red flag to go, okay, something's amiss here. I need to watch that. And that would help you make the decision whether or not you needed to cut staff.
Well, and it's more subtle than that, right? I mean, it could be, you could be running a company with, 12 divisions, and it could be one division is slowing up. 2 or 3 divisions are growing. So it's like cylinders on a car. It may be that we have to adjust headcount in one division and increase it in another. Now, that could be a transfer if the skills are right. So it's usually, depending on the size of the company, it usually isn't that binary, where we just, I walk in on Monday morning and say, let's riff 15% of the staff. That's, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is make sure you have leading indicators that will give you the time and the heads up to make adjustments as you need.
So
Okay.
what are some of the other tools that you would pull out aside from, looking for ways to cut overhead that you would need to make these adjustments when things go from being great
Look at
to
sales funnel. I mean, is the sales funnel growing?
Mhm.
How many salespeople are on quota? Do we need to, if I hired 3 salespeople, I would always model that one would be good, one would be average, and one would be gone a year later. So I've always had a bell-shaped curve in my sales organizations. And if people come in and go, hey, we're going to hire 40 salespeople and they're each going to do 2 million in revenue, so we're going to drive 80 million in revenue. It's not going to be like that. You're going to have some A's, you're going to have some B's, and then you have a tail on a curve of people who don't make it. So I also want to model my business, and I don't want to model it with best case scenarios. It's just not realistic.
Mhm.
So that's the other thing that I would say is if you're making an investment in a new product or opening a new territory, I know what you're doing with HPG supply. If you're going into a new area, I want to see the business plan. That business plan should have P&L. It should have gates, critical gates, go, no-go gates. I want to see a timeline. And I also want to see that, if things are not going according to plan, what steps can we take to mitigate, a challenge?
Mhm.
It doesn't mean shut down the division, but it means, and then the other thing that I would say, and this was very, very important in every unit I led, and I'd say this at every kickoff meeting, Q1 sets the tone for the year. And I would say this till people got tired of me saying it. And I'd say, guys, let me lay out how the year can go for us. So we have Q1. Let's say our goal for Q1 was 25 million in revenue. I'll give you 2 scenarios. One is we do 29 million in revenue. Now we're 4 million over plan. We're hiring ahead of plan. We're hiring more people sooner. We're paying out good bonuses. And we're thinking about taking that extra 4 million and investing it back in the business in terms of headcount or, a marketing spend, search engine optimization, whatever. That's a good scenario. I'll give you another scenario. Our goal, our target, our budget, our quota for Q1 was 25 million. We came in at 20. Now, you know what that does? That makes Q2 a catch-up quarter. And all of a sudden, we get tunnel vision. We get very short-sighted. Everything we're focused on is we got to catch back up in Q2.
Mhm.
And now you get very tactical. And the CEO, instead of spending time on strategy, is saying, hey, are we going to catch up in Q2? If you don't catch up in Q2, then you're talking about making adjustments in Q3. But Q1 would set the tone for the year. And I would always encourage my teams, let's work as hard as we can in the first quarter so that we get out ahead of plan or on plan. Because if we fall behind, the rest of the year is a catch-up, and it becomes very tactical.
Mhm. Q1 sets the tone for the year. I like that. I'm going to implement that in my team meetings. When you were running these teams and you're pulling out the tools that you need to pull out, or you're having a good year versus bad, you mentioned that the nearsightedness of having to hit each quarter would cause you to have tunnel vision versus if you were hitting it and you were doing fine, you could focus more on long-term strategy. And so I know a lot of people have complained, and we've got this problem where everyone's just focused on the next quarter. What did that look like? Like, what adjustments would you do differently if everything was fine and you didn't have tunnel vision versus you had the flexibility to, focus on long-term strategy?
Well, now keep in mind, I'm not doing this alone. I have a management team, I have executive staff, and I have a board. So I'm getting advice and support from different areas. So we're working with each executive in each division. How are we doing? We go back and forth on ideas. And then, the role of the board is to make sure that the CEO isn't becoming, just a visionary, and the CEO is not Mr. Tactical. Otherwise he's a COO. So you should be getting help. A lot of times people say CEO is a lonely job, and it is a lonely job from the point of view is you don't have peers that you can talk to. That's why so many CEOs join peer groups. But you do have a management team that you can vet ideas with. Also, you listen, and you've got a board. Now, you may say like, oh, some of our people listening to the podcast are smaller companies. Well, you may not have an official board, but you certainly have people that you rely on, mentors that you can call for advice. And, even the smallest company is going to have a team where you can knock around ideas. And it's good for the management team to be able to say no to you or to challenge you. You can't be such a strong leader that you take all the air out of the room and that nobody wants to challenge you, because you don't have all the right answers. You don't have all the good ideas. And there's some times that you're so passionate and so forceful in presenting an idea that you just dominate the conference room. You have to guard against that.
Healthy conflict and culture. They talk about that being hugely instrumental in being able to grow. Healthy culture breeds trust. People stay around longer, less turnover. What steps did you take to build culture in your organization when you're running it?
One of my mentors used to call it healthy tension. And, the best teams, and, I really enjoyed it because, my senior management team, I had executives from the UK and from India. So we had different cultures and different mores and different styles. And actually that made us better because there was different, there was different vocabulary and some things I could say to my Indian team, if I ever said it to the British team, they'd freak. Their skin wasn't as thick. And the Americans too. So, you have to learn every team's style. But, what we used to do, and I always used to say, guys, even if I'm not here, how I would react. I'm very predictable. And we would schedule our business with, Monday there was a sales meeting. I didn't go to that. I let the VP of sales run the sales meeting. He doesn't need me there. He doesn't need a shadow, right? And I was good at sales. But, you're not the VP of sales anymore. You're the CEO. So there'd be a sales meeting on Monday. On Wednesday would be delivery and development meeting, status of our projects and how we're doing with our products. And then every Friday morning at 7:30, because remember, we're in Denver, so the UK was 7 hours ahead and India was 12 and a half hours ahead. So we would have our weekly staff meeting at 7:30 in the morning. And, we just go around what's going on in marketing, what's going on in HR, what's going on in finance, what's going on in legal, how we doing, challenges, hiring, anything we need to talk about. It was a good level set. And there was a process that even if I weren't there, those meetings would still take place. And then we would always start our budget meetings. Usually we had to present our budget to the board, usually the second week of December. So we'd start building our budget usually around September, October. And we would go through 3 meetings. The first meeting was the Wild West. You'd put any wish on any idea was a good idea, wish list. What can we do to make the business better next year? And we'd have a long list. Then we'd go away for 2 weeks and we'd work on that list. And then we'd come back and vet that list down because we can't do everything. Microsoft, There's nothing worse than going into Microsoft and saying you've got the 13th best idea for them, because they're only doing their top 10. So, but you want to brainstorm with your team offsite one day, no bad ideas, put the ideas on the board. Then we go away for 2 weeks. We're running the business, but we're also working on those ideas. We're vetting them, we're qualifying them. We come back 2 weeks later, we cut the list down. We prioritize A's, B's, and C's. We go away for another 2 weeks, running the business. Now we're vetting those A, B's, and C's. We come back, we never can do the C's. We don't have bandwidth, we don't have budget. And then we create our budget with the A's and B's. These are initiatives we're going to fund for the next year. Once we've agreed as a team on those initiatives for the next year, they get priced out, expensed out. We calendarize the revenue. We timeline everything. If we're going to hire 12 people next year, are we hiring 12 on January 5th? No, probably not. You're going to hire 3 in Q1, 3 in Q2, and, as the year unfolds. After we're done with our third meeting, then we build the budget for the next year, present it to the board. The board will give us feedback. We'll tune it up a little bit, not too much usually. And then that becomes the operating plan for the year. That gets presented to all the employees either the first or second week of January. So everybody knows what our plan is. And as we're presenting the plan, our employees should be sitting there saying, okay, I understand. If you use a football analogy and you go like you're doing, long pass, the linemen are saying, okay, we're doing pass blocking. So when we're presenting the budget for our employees, professional services is sitting there saying, okay, that means we have to have an offer that we can bring to market in March to support that new product's revenue. And the salespeople are saying, all right, we're going to get a new release in April. So we have to start selling that, pre-selling it in January. And finance is looking at it and saying, if the guys sell a new product and we get our first orders in June, we'll probably start seeing our first cash from that new product in August or September. So everybody's looking at it through their own lens. But you've put together the strategic plan, the budget for the year, that everybody knows what their role is: finance, legal, HR, product development, sales. Everybody knows how they're going to make the overall budget work.
I feel like my head just exploded.
Yeah.
My head just exploded. I feel like there's so many things that I'm not doing when it comes to creating a strategic plan now.
Remember, I was running a bigger company, so take some of these comments and make them fit to your organization's needs.
Mm-hmm.
But bring a budget into your next year. Share it with the employees. Maybe not every line item, but share it with the employees so they know where the company is going and they know what role they're playing in that contribution.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you have that budget, every quarter say, how did we do against plan? Nothing makes a team more confident than to say, we said we were going to do X, Y, and Z. How did we do come March 31st or April 15th?
Mm-hmm.
And we said we did great on X. We did pretty good on Y. Z we're a little light on, so we're going to work on that. But you lay out the plan, you execute the plan, and then you report on the plan. I'm already reporting on it to the investors. I'm reporting on it to the board. I have to share with the employees. And again, that doesn't matter if you're running a company with 6 employees or 6,000.
Mm-hmm.
You want to communicate the plan and then show how you're doing actual versus plan. Metrics.
This has been super enlightening and a lot of fun. For those that want to learn more about you, learn more about Dupper Analytics, where should they go?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. So just like everybody, I have a LinkedIn profile. If you're interested in Dupper Analytics, where we have these high school students build great cloud-based solutions out of an AWS cloud, you could reach me at thad@dupperanalytics.com. But you can find me on LinkedIn, and I check that once a week or so.
All right, we'll make sure that those links are posted in the description of this episode. We're tuning out. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Brandon. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work.